Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome to today's video. This episode will guide you through the issues of the Uncanny X-Men published by Marvel Comics in 1976. Issue number 97. Charles Xavier is being tormented in his sleep. He is having a nightmare, and he shouts out. But is this really a dream though, or rather a nightmare of things to come? And to whom is he shouting? Who is he asking to leave him alone and to get out of his mind? Whoever it is certainly not someone who is responding to him. And instead, Xavier finds himself once again in a nightmare he has experienced many times before. Far, far away from the safe confines of his home, he has been drawn into hell. A hell deep in space. A hell in the form of a battle he has seen play out many times. Two mighty starfleets creating their own private Armageddon in the desolate space around a giant binary sun. And there is nothing else he can do but watch it unfold. He witnesses men aboard the ships die, as the hulls are being breached by the enemy energy beams. He can feel their quick, but brutal and merciless deaths. He can feel the pain of these aliens as they die and can feel the terrible cold of this alien space he finds himself in. And all he can think of, as he has done many times before, is to wonder if he isn't going insane. And then, as sudden and silent as the battle began, it ends just as abruptly. It's strange how so much death can occur in so much silence, really. Somehow, it just doesn't seem right. Amongst all the dying, one small scout craft manages to survive this holocaust. It manages to run and hide, to hopefully live and to fight another day. And as it is fleeing the scene, Xavier finds himself getting drawn to it, like a moth to a flame. And once again, he cannot stop this. He gets pulled in, closer and closer. This dream of his has his body and soul, and it's not letting him go. Not before it gets in even closer. Closer than ever before. And this time around, it's so close that he can even see a face. And that is when Xavier wakes up, shouting no, and he's all sweaty, trying to clear his mind as the echoes of his own scream still ring in his ears. He thinks to himself how it's ironic that he prides himself for possessing the strongest mutant brain on the whole of planet Earth. Yet, this dream that's been bugging him for many days now tears his mind apart at will. It's time to face the truth. Time to face the fact that his mind is no longer his own. He pulls himself out of bed and moves himself into his wheelchair. He makes himself a cup of coffee, and that's when Moira comes up to him. She notices how he's shaking like a leaf. She tells him that she heard him scream and asks him what's wrong, while she pours him a cup of coffee with a steady hand. He then tells her that he had the same dream again, but this time stronger than ever. He tells her there's so much incredible power behind it. Moira tells him that he's asking too much from himself, and that he should probably open up to the others and tell them about this, as she lays her hand on his shoulder. But he asks her how. How can he ever tell his students that he thinks he's going mad? But Moira tells him that it's not as bad as he says it is. She points out that she came to him when he asked her for help, just like she said she would. Charleston says that he had no right to ask her after what had happened before, but Moira doesn't let him finish his thoughts. She tells him to not be foolish because that is what friends are for. Xavier then smiles for the first time in many weeks, and he slowly drinks his coffee. And even though his body seems to relax, his eyes are far from relaxed. They keep shifting and are never still, as if he is waiting for the dawn that cannot come too soon. And eventually, dawn does break. 2 hours after the sun has come up in New York, the same sun rises over Rio Diablo. Even though this piece of land is a hell on earth to most, doctoral candidates Alex Summers and Lorna Dane think it's a paradise. They have been here for about 6 months now, and over time their friendship has become a lot more than just a friendship. As Alex kisses Lorna goodbye, she realizes that she has struck gold with this man. as she's cleaning up breakfast, she figures that after all the hassles and grief she has experienced before, she finally feels whole again. When she is with this man, she feels whole, complete and fulfilled. She feels like a woman, and that feels just fine. She then hears someone knocking on the door, and she wonders who it is, since they should pretty much be the only people around here for miles. She knows that she shouldn't be in danger, because her mutant magnetic power should be able to handle any kind of trouble. But when she opens the door, she sees someone familiar. Someone familiar who quickly and easily hurts her and manages to knock her out cold. But not that far away, Alex could still hear Lorna scream. He instantly recognizes her voice and rushes back to the house. When he runs inside and asks if she is alright, he sees her standing by the cabinet where she is keeping her clothes. She tells him that she is alright and there is no need to shout. So Alex asks her why she screamed out then, because he came running all the way back from the canyon. He sees she's holding her costume and asks her what that is all about. Lorna then tells him that the costume is hers, and she blasts him while she tells him that her magnetic powers are hers as well. The power of Polaris, the mistress of magnetism. The power of death. And Alex can only just utter a scream as he falls to the floor, unconscious. And Lorna is then joined by the character who attacked her just minutes before, and he tells her that he will use Alex to achieve their prime objective, namely making sure that Charles Xavier will die. Three days pass and we then move to Kennedy International Airport, where there will be a goodbye of sorts. 5 friends have gathered to see their professor off on a well-earned vacation. Jean Grey has come along for the occasion, and tells Xavier to be careful and to not stay in direct sunlight for too long, because his skin burns easily. But Charles mocks her overprotectiveness and Jean gets the point. She then asks what happened to Banshee and Wolverine since they are not here with them, and Aurora tells her that Sean chose to spend the afternoon with Moira instead, and Wolverine was apparently just feeling unsociable. They then say their final goodbyes to Xavier as he gets on board of the plane and quickly tells Jean to tell Nightcrawler that Tony Stark's image inducer is not a toy and is meant to help him blend in and not make him look like some kind of 1930s movie star. Speaking of Kurt, he is at the gate, admiring some ladies and asks Piotr his opinion on some of the girls. Piotr honestly doesn't know what to say, because he's not used to women walking around in short skirts like the women in America are. Where he is from, women dress a lot more conservative. And at that moment, Piotr gets distracted, because he sees Alex Summers and Lorna Dane at the airport, wearing their Havoc and Polaris costumes. He's not sure what's going on here, but he is alert. Alex has made his way to Scott, Jean and the airplane where Professor X is on. Scott immediately asks his brother Alex why they are here, and why they are wearing their costumes. Jean warns Scott that something is wrong. She's picking up sensations and is seeing images, and then she tells Scott that it's a trap. This is Polaris' cue to attack Jean and blast her with her powers, while telling her that she just foolishly signed her own death warrant. Scott screams out, having just seen his loved one getting attacked, and shouts at Polaris, asking her if she's gone crazy and what she thinks she's doing. Havoc then tells his brother that they are doing what they have to do, and tells his brother to stay out of the way because it's Xavier who they want, and not them. Scott then tells Havoc that that will only happen over his dead body, and Havoc is willing to oblige. Scott is trying to stop Alex, who is starting to charge up his mutant powers, which can be seen by everyone around. The 2 pilots in the aircraft are seeing this unfold and know that they should get out of here, before these guys kill one another and they are caught in the middle. They start moving, and not one moment too soon. As the plane makes its way down the runway, Havoc and Polaris are hot in pursuit. Storm, Colossus and Nightcrawler have made their way outside to the platform as well and find Scott lying on the ground. He's telling them that Alex and Lorna are going after Xavier, and that they have to stop them in any way that they can. And fast. Colossus changes into his organic metal form, and Nightcrawler does away with the illusion the image inducer provided him with. They both see Havoc getting ready to blast the plane, as do the pilots aboard it. Nightcrawler then tackles Havoc from behind, but what he doesn't realize is that by doing so, he made Havoc lose the focus of his powers, and his blast goes wild. And it totally ravages another plane close by, totally wrecking it and making it explode, with one single blast. And the small plane Xavier is on only barely managed to escape in time. The X-Men back on the platform are watching this inferno lighting up their surroundings, and are just thankful that the Boeing 747 was undergoing maintenance and that it wasn't carrying any passengers. Cyclops then grabs his brother Havoc and asks him if he has completely lost his mind. Asks him what he thinks he's doing. Havoc can only stutter a bit, and then Cyclops hears a voice behind him. A voice telling him that Havoc was simply following orders. His orders. And as Cyclops turns his head around, he sees a familiar character standing there. Namely, Eric the Red. But this confuses Cyclops, because he himself was actually Eric the Red at one point in the past. Eric the Red then tells Cyclops that it doesn't matter who he is, but what matters is that he is power incarnate, and that nothing can stand against him. Nightcrawler and Colossus help Cyclops to attack at once, at his command, but Eric the Red easily deals with them, telling them that they will not be able to take him, that all they will do is die. Storm, who is flying in the air trying to get Jean to safety, can tell that the battle is going against them. She thinks herself lucky that neither Havoc nor Polaris can fly. But unbeknownst to her, Polaris has learned a new trick. She has learned how to manipulate Earth's gravitational field during their battle with Krakoa, a couple of months back, and is now able to get real close to Storm up in the air, catching her off guard and being able to blast her high up in the sky. Storm realizes way too late and drops Jean, who plummets to the ground. Storm dives towards Jean, even though she is still groggy from Polaris' attack. She's having a hard time to concentrate, but she has to make her way to Jean and try and grab her. Has to make an effort, as she only has one chance to save Jean from crashing. She strains herself, but she made it, just in time. Storm then quickly drops off Jean on a rooftop close by so she can head back and deal with Polaris. And deal with her she shall. She summons all her elemental powers and gets ready to attack Polaris. Full power. Back on ground level, the two Summers brothers are standing face to face with one another. Alex begs Scott to please let him and Lorna go, before something happens which they will all regret, but Scott tells him that he will not allow that before he gets some answers. Not until he has found out why Alex turned on them and tried to kill them. Alex tries to answer, but he can't really explain coherently. All he knows is that Eric the Red forced his mind to do it. Scott tells his little brother to fight it, to break free. He tells Alex that he knows he can do it. Alex tells him that he's trying, but he can't, as once again his mutant powers amp up. Scott notices this happening and can tell that Alex can't seem to break away from Eric the Red's control. He fires his I-beam towards the ground below Alex's feet, making him lose his balance. Scott does not want to hurt his little brother, but he also knows that if Alex were to cut loose, he'd be a goner. But Havoc is not as careful as his big brother is. He then fires his blast at the wall behind Cyclops, which crumbles and falls right on top of him. Havoc then snaps to for a minute and realizes what he has done. He runs towards Cyclops saying that he's sorry and that he didn't mean to. He didn't even want to. Havoc fears that he has killed his brother. He starts clearing the rubble and pulls his brother's body out of the debris. He finds him to be alive still and tries to carry him out of there to safety. He tells Cyclops to take it easy and that it will be alright. But Cyclops punches him right in the face, telling Havoc that this is for his own good. And as Cyclops knocks his brother out cold, Colossus and Nightcrawler are trying to subdue Eric the Red, who is convinced that the two of them cannot beat him, and he calls them mutant vermin. He then throws Nightcrawler, who is on his back trying to get a hold of him, and launches him at Colossus with full force. But right before Nightcrawler is about to smash into Colossus, he manages to teleport himself away, leaving nothing but a crack of flame and the stench of brimstone where he once was. And almost instantly, Nightcrawler materializes again, on top of the wing of a nearby airplane. Eric does not know where Nightcrawler went. And as Nightcrawler jumps downward from the wing of the airplane and dives towards Eric the Red's legs, he tells his teammate Colossus to strike Eric up high. But sadly, Eric the Red is simply too powerful for them. Not just for Kurt, but for Pyotr as well. Even his strongest punch does not knock Eric the Red off his feet. But instead, Eric does just that to Colossus. And he punches him straight into the landing gear of one of the airplanes, causing it to break and tip over, smashing its wing on the ground, right where the landing gear was, crushing Colossus. Kurt shouts out for Colossus and asks if he is alright, but there is no response. Kurt then swears to Eric the Red that if he has killed Pyotr, but before he can finish the sentence, Colossus is making his way from underneath the debris, smashing himself to freedom again. Pyotr is still alive and well, and he says that it will take a lot more than Eric to kill him. And he chucks the remainder of the landing gear right at Eric the Red, which catches him by surprise. And in just a couple of minutes, the airport has become a scenery of a battle of epic proportions, with Eric the Red having just smashed through a pile of fuel drums, now lying broken and still, and the skies above going dark, with only the energy signatures of two powerful mutant elementals being visible. Storm and Polaris are engaged in a deathly duel, but it eventually comes to a stalemate. Polaris realizes that the two of them are too evenly matched, and suggests for this game to end in a draw. Her choice of words enrages Storm, who does not consider this to be a game at all. There's too much at stake, and Havoc and Polaris started attacking the X-Men without any kind of warning, and there was no form of provocation. The two of them tried to kill the X-Men, without a single thought for the innocent bystanders, who have been endangered and could have possibly gotten killed in their attack. Storm then unleashes the full potential of her powers on Polaris. Fueled up by rage, Storm makes clear to Polaris that this is definitely not a game. Polaris then gets hit with multiple lightning attacks, and drops out of the sky, yelling out and falling towards the concrete ground on the runway. Havoc sees this happening and shouts out for his lover. He attacks Cyclops with a full blast of his cosmic energies, aimed directly, this time around, at his body, cursing his brother, telling him that he will kill him if Lorna has been hurt. He will kill them all, if that is the case. Alex runs towards Lorna, who has fallen to the ground. He wants to strike out at his brother and his brother's teammates. He fears that he will have to do so if he finds out that Lorna has died, because of the simple fact that he loves this woman. For the love he feels for this woman, he would lie, cheat, steal, and yes, even kill. And in only a few moments from now, he might just do so. But instead, at that time, reinforcements for the X-Men have arrived, in the form of Wolverine and Banshee. Eric the Red sees them arrive, and figures Xavier must have summoned them with his telepathy. He then tells Havoc and Polaris to come to him. He realizes that this battle has not been going in their favor. And since only a fool stands to fight against hopeless odds, he says it's better for them to leave now. He picks the two of them up and flies them out of there. Cyclops yells out to his brother to stop, or he will fire. He tells Alex that he means it, that he will cut the three of them down if he has to. But then, Cyclops stutters and hesitates. He simply cannot kill his own brother. Wolverine asks him why he's hesitating and doesn't fire. He has a clear shot at them and tells Cyclops to blast them out of the sky. They are getting away and he has to blast them now. Wolverine keeps on yelling to Scott, asking him why he's hesitating, and why he doesn't shoot them already. They initiated the attack and now he's just standing there, watching them fly away. Wolverine then calls him a hotshot and asks him what the matter is, and asks him if he is gutless or something. Cyclops, already frustrated and angry with himself, turns to Wolverine and just knocks him off his feet with a backhanded clenched fist. Wolverine then gets up, pops his claws out and tells Cyclops that he's going to cut him wide open for doing that. But Storm then interrupts Wolverine and holds him back by his shoulder, saying that he will not be doing such a thing. Not now and not ever, or he will have to answer to her. And Scott, with a mind torn with questions he can't answer, and feelings he can't explain, walks off alone. His brother tried to kill him today, and he just knows that the next time they will meet, there will be no holding back. One brother will be killing another, and the true horror of that day will be that they will kill each other without knowing the reason why. That day they will not be men at all, but merely just puppets on a string, dancing to the beat of someone else's drum.
Issue number 98. It's Christmas time in New York, the most wonderful time of the year. And for the first time in years, it's actually a white Christmas. The members of the X-Men, accompanied by the former member Jean Grey and Moira MacTaggert, are enjoying the festivities. What's considered a normal holiday season for resident New Yorkers is not normal for some of the X-Men. Not only is this part of the city covered in Christmas decorations and lights, but now also with snow, fitting the Christmas spirit. However, Piotr and Kurt are more enamored by two ladies, and they don't seem to mind it one bit. Moira and Sean break off from the group as they plan to navigate through the streets of New York by themselves. Jean asks Wolverine what he will do, but he tells her that he doesn't care one bit about Christmas. Even so, he wishes them a nice time. Jean and Scott make their way inside a restaurant to continue on their date by themselves. Scott tells Jean that he thinks Wolverine is a strange man, that even though they have been together for almost a year, he's still not sure if Wolverine will work out on the team. But then again, he tells her, he was sure about his brother Alex and Lorna Dane, yet they tried to kill them and the rest of the team only a couple of weeks ago. Jean then tells him to stop it. It's Christmas and he should let it go. He's been tearing himself up over what happened with Alex, and she wants him to give it a rest. Just this once. And she wants him to kiss her. Since she has to ask him twice, she simply forces herself on him, and of course, Scott does not object. Unlike the two older men who happen to pass them, and they notice how these young kids have no respect. Scott compliments Jean as they make their way to their table, and he tells her he loves her, and Jean tells him that she's glad to hear that. This promises to become a joyful night, a nice lovely dinner in a chic restaurant overlooking New York from several stories up. But then, Scott notices there's something huge outside, and it seems to be tearing at the roof. Scott yells out for Jean, as they now see what has torn the roof of the restaurant straight off. The Sentinels have returned. Enormous mutant-hunting robots programmed with one single objective, spelling out doom for all mutant kind. For tonight though, their main mission programming requires the capture of the mutants known as Cyclops and Marvel Girl. This new line of Sentinels have been equipped with the newest technology to negate their powers, as Scott soon finds out. His concussive eye blasts are hardly slowing them down, if at all. Jean says that hopefully the Sentinels are referring to the old X-Men team the Sentinels had fought years ago, and are not familiar with how much stronger Jean has become over the years. And she attacks one of the Sentinels with a powerful telekinetic mind blast, which throws the Sentinel off balance. This forces the Sentinel outside of the building, allowing Scott to unleash his full powers of his optic blast, which tears the Sentinel's chest apart. In other words, one Sentinel down and one more to go. But the second Sentinel is already aware of the other Sentinel being dysfunctional, and is now forced to take extreme caution against Scott. As he's holding Jean in his one hand, he blasts Scott with the other, before either one is able to do something about it. And Scott never had a chance. Jean, who is being fearful of the Sentinel having killed Scott, gets gassed unconscious. The Sentinel then flies off with her, reporting back on the mission, including the termination of the mutant called Cyclops. But we find out that Scott did not die in the Sentinel's attack on him. At least, not yet. His chest hurts from the blast, It feels like it's on fire, but he has another situation to concern himself with at this very moment. The thrust created by the Sentinel's liftoff is causing the wreckage of the building to collapse, throwing Scott off the roof. His only chance is to grab a hold of the radio mast close by, and then pray that it will hold his weight, because if it doesn't, it's a 60-story drop to the pavement below, with no one around to catch him as he falls. Luckily, it holds, but only barely. He can tell that if he moves as much as an inch, it might just break still. All he can do is stay where he is and just hold on, not knowing for how long he will have to hang around like this, nor how long he will be able to. We then move back in time for about a minute's worth, to ground level, where the remains of the Sentinel which got wrecked by Cyclops' optic blast crashes on the ground. The civilians scatter, knowing how dangerous it will be to be standing around here, thinking it's all part of the building. But Banshee knows that this is no building. He recognizes the parts flying around are from a Sentinel, and he immediately starts using his powers to uncover his costume. He then tells Moira and Storm to find Nightcrawler and Colossus and warn them about the attack of the Sentinels. He himself will be flying up towards where the Sentinels' remains drop down from, because he figures Marvel Girl and Cyclops will need all the help they can get. Storm asks him what a Sentinel is, and all Banshee can tell her is that to mutants, Sentinels equal death. As Banshee lifts himself from the ground, Wolverine grabs him by the ankles and joins him. He is not letting his teammate get into a fight by himself. Storm then uses her powers as well, and the bystanders are now aware of the fact that this scenario involves the presence of mutants, both due to Storm's display of powers, as well as what Banshee just said. Instead of joining Moira to search for Colossus and Nightcrawler like Banshee had told her to do, Storm flies to the roof of the building as well. Same as Wolverine, she will not stay behind and let her teammates fight the Sentinels without her, so she follows right behind Banshee. She sees Cyclops hanging on the radio mast and tells him to not be afraid because he's safe now. He's glad to see her and that the Sentinels were not able to catch them all. She asks him what he means by that, and he tells her that a bunch of them just plucked Wolverine and Banshee out of the sky, and there wasn't a thing he could do to stop that from happening. Storm then makes sure by asking Cyclops if these Sentinels are large metallic robots. He confirms this, but he doesn't understand her asking this question, until he sees a large shadow dropping over them, that is. One more of the Sentinels is right there behind him. This Sentinel attacks Cyclops immediately, attempting to correct the error of the other Sentinel's report of Cyclops' death. Storm, being shocked by this brutal attack on Cyclops and then getting attacked herself, unleashes all her primal forces of nature and directs it at the Sentinel. The Sentinel starts telling Storm that they've been programmed and equipped to deal with any and all mutant powers, but it quickly finds out that it cannot counter the forces of nature that easily. Storm creates a hurricane, right above Rockefeller Center. The sheer force of the winds, the turbulence, as well as the lightning bolts cause a system overload in the Sentinel and tear it apart. The civilians close by are amazed at what they see happening in the skies above them, and they can't believe their eyes. Cyclops tells her to stop it before she destroys the whole of the city, and Storm tells him that there is no need to worry. She says that she has total control over her weather manipulating powers, and nothing was harmed in the process, apart from the Sentinel. Scott understands now, and he mentions that if Professor X had been here, but then it hits Scott. The Professor does not know about these new Sentinels, and he has to be warned about their existence, if it's not already too late. We then shift 1,000 miles south on the globe, where during the daytime, a private yacht is trolling the islands. It is here that Professor Charles Xavier has come to spend his vacation of sorts and to ask an old friend for help. Xavier is currently fishing as his old friend, Peter Corbeau, director of the United Nations Project Starcore among other things, approaches him. Xavier has come here to ask Peter to look into the binary star system, which he has been having vivid dreams of as of late. Such vivid dreams that Xavier thinks there might be more to them than just dreams. But Corbeau tells Xavier that that specific binary star system he described does not seem to exist. Xavier asks him if he's absolutely sure and if he hasn't overlooked something. But Corbeau tells Xavier that he should know better than that. He has checked the program a dozen times over. He has even ran a query through the Fantastic Four and Avengers charts, but the result was the same. Corbeau then tells Xavier that he has been under a lot of strain lately, possibly more than any man could bear, and that it could just be that this star system doesn't even exist, and that it's all just in his mind. This is something which Xavier did not need to be told, because he himself has been having doubts about his own mental stability. Xavier asks Corbeau if he thinks that he's insane, but he tells him that he thinks he's just tired. That's all. But he does think that he should seek professional help. And right at that moment, there's a tug at the line of the fishing rod. But it is not a fish doing the tugging. It's a sentinel, emerging from under the water, telling Xavier that it has come for him. Xavier doesn't understand how the sentinel found him, because his mental defenses should have shielded him, but obviously that is not the case. Xavier immediately attacks it with a powerful mind blast. Finding Xavier is one thing, but taking him captive is another. Xavier's mind blast penetrates the sentinel's shields and is not able to compensate in time, making it lose its balance and fall backwards. Xavier thinks to himself that he's clearly drained from the mental tension lately, because his attack should have actually destroyed the sentinel altogether. Xavier tells Corbeau to start the boat's engine and to leave this place. And Corbeau responds by saying that Xavier has bought them enough time for them to get out of there fast. He tells Xavier to keep an eye on the boat, while he tries to get a hold of his contacts in the Air Force. But as Corbeau broadcasts a media signal, Xavier is overcome by a barrage of images, words and colors. It seems to him as if worlds unknown are crashing together and dying. He's seeing so many images right now, and through them all, a terrible aching need, and also an unfamiliar familiar face. He screams out loud, and Corbeau can hear her scream, and he would have done something to try and aid Xavier, but he never got the chance. Another sentinel attacks them, this time crashing the vessel they are on, and throwing both Xavier and Corbeau in the water. The sentinel tells Xavier that he can't escape. As Corbeau is trying to get back to the surface, he is starting to worry. He's not sure if his lungs will hold, since he couldn't prepare for having to go underwater. But he makes it. He calls out for Xavier, but then sees the sentinel leaving the area, holding Xavier captive. He overhears the sentinel's report on the mission and hears it say that it's going back to the base, but that its sensors indicate that solar radiation is nearing its tolerance level. But for now, that is not Peter Corbeau's concern. He finds himself shipwrecked about 200 miles from land, and he's not even sure if anyone heard his Mayday distress signal. Several days later, we find out what has happened to the members of the X-Men whom the Sentinels abducted, as they are being examined by scientists led by Dr. Stephen Lang. He's getting informed by his personnel that they will have to shut down the Sentinels' operations for the time being because of the solar radiation storms. Stephen Lang understands, and tells them they will have to make do with the mutants they already have in captivity for the time being. There seems to be some confusion among the scientists about Wolverine, whether he's a mutant or not, because his readings are unlike the others. But Lang says that the Sentinels confirm him being a mutant. And, according to Lang, whether Wolverine is a mutant or not, he is certainly not human. Wolverine is getting annoyed and tells Lang to keep it up and he'll do something. But Lang tells him he won't do a thing. The shackles he's holding Wolverine in are unbreakable. Marvel Girl then asks Lang where Swastika is. But Lang tells her he's not a Nazi. He's just a man doing his duty. So Marvel Girl asks him if he's just following orders then, and he tells her that mutant kind is the enemy, and he has to find a way to destroy them. She then asks why he started with the X-Men, and he tells her that the X-Men have been the most effective mutant opposition to the Sentinels. She herself, Cyclops and Xavier are the heart and soul of this opposition. If you will be able to take them out of the equation, the Sentinels will be unbeatable. Marvel Girl then calls him a sad, screwed up and pathetic little man, and asks him if he really thinks the X-Men are this easily beaten. Lang tells her yes, and then smacks her with the back of his hand in her face. This now triggers Wolverine more than anything Lang had said before. He extends his claws, which break the supposedly unbreakable shackles. Lang quickly tries to run away and activates one of the Sentinels while guardsmen try to subdue Wolverine. To no avail. Lang then instructs the Sentinel to secure the mutant, alive if it can, but dead if it must. Wolverine is a lot harder to subdue for the Sentinel, as it quickly finds out. Where he was easily captured while hanging onto Banshee's ankles a few days ago, on his feet, Wolverine is a way bigger threat. All the guardsmen then flee after they've seen Wolverine tear up a Sentinel all by himself. They all know that they don't stand a chance against him. This is the first time Wolverine's teammates have seen him using his claws without his costume on, and they now realize that his claws are part of his body and not part of the costume. Wolverine asks what Marvel Girl is trying to do, and she tells him that she's trying to tear up her dress, because it's too tight around her legs for being in a running fight. Wolverine is glad to help her out with that, as he grabs a part of it and rips a huge part of Marvel Girl's dress. She yells out to him because she didn't want it to be this short, but Wolverine likes it this way just fine. They now start to make a plan to escape this facility. Wolverine wants to leave Xavier behind for now, with him being crippled and unconscious. But Marvel Girl and Banshee are not having that. They want to take Xavier along with them, but while they're arguing about it, one more Sentinel barges through the walls. Banshee takes care of this one and tells the others to head for the other door, and he will try to cover them. But before they know it, there are Sentinels everywhere. Banshee tells his teammates to hurry up and to hit them with everything they can, before the Sentinels can react and counter their attacks. Marvel Girl then notices something being off, because their powers are easily chopping the Sentinels to bits. Wolverine tells her to not look a gift horse in the mouth. Marvel Girl then warns him, and that's when he notices he's getting grabbed from behind. But it's too late and he cannot get away in time. The Sentinel has Wolverine pinned, with the robot's fingers wrapped around his arms and body, so he cannot use his claws to slash himself free. Marvel Girl then focuses all her telekinetic powers into a tight mind blast, trying to fuse the robot's computer brain, and she's successful in doing so, liberating Wolverine. But the robot itself topples and comes falling right at Marvel Girl herself. There's no time for her to run out of harm's way, but luckily for her, the Banshee is here to save her. He then flies himself and Marvel Girl towards Wolverine and grabs him as well, using his sonic scream to not only fly them out of there, but to tear a hole through the walls of the rooms next to the one they were in. And then, his scream just suddenly stops. He can see New York from where he's at, but he will not be able to reach it. So close, yet so far away. And his friends in New York, Cyclops and Nightcrawler, still have no idea where their lost teammates are. Cyclops has had Cerebro scanning the entire world twice now, but no sign of them anywhere. Nightcrawler then tells Cyclops that he's been burning himself out. He has been at it for 4 days now, with no rest and barely any food. Cyclops tells him that he knows what he's doing, and if he wants Nightcrawler's advice, he will ask him for it. Then suddenly the intruder alarm goes off. There seems to be someone climbing over the back wall. Cyclops then tells Nightcrawler to stay here while he will go check out who it is. But Nightcrawler is already on it. He has already teleported himself outside. Cyclops then recognizes who the supposed intruder is. He remembers Xavier's old friend Peter Corbeau. After having told Peter Corbeau all that has happened in the past couple of days, he introduces him to the rest of the team in Moira, telling them that Corbeau has come here to help. He then tells Corbeau that he has been using Cerebro, but that it can't find the missing teammates, not even a residual trace, and the only way for that to happen is for them to be dead. Cyclops, however, will not accept that, but what other choice do they have when it seems like they've vanished from the face of the earth? And then Peter Corbeau gets it. That is precisely why Cerebro scans couldn't find them, and that's the reason why the Sentinel which attacked Corbeau and Xavier was so worried about solar flares. Their lost teammates and Professor Xavier are currently not on planet Earth at all. Issue number 99. The biggest difference between the atmosphere surrounding Earth and the vast space outside of it is that space is pretty much a vacuum. meaning that apart from certain objects flying around in it, there are hardly any molecules to be found in it. No molecules means no air and no vibrations of any kind. And what that means is that sound cannot expand itself as it would do within Earth's atmosphere. This merciless and undeniable fact is something which the Irishman Sean Cassidy is currently being reminded of. When the X-Men, otherwise known as Banshee, used his mutant powers of shrieking with his vocal cords, which allow him to create high-pitched vibrations and use these to fly him around among other things, he tried to rescue his teammate Wolverine and his former teammate Jean Grey from captivity. When he carried them and blasted the three of them through the walls of the structure that they were being held captive in about a minute ago, he found out that where he had assumed they were on some location on planet Earth, they were actually being held captive on some kind of space station orbiting the planet instead. And the three of them now find themselves helplessly drifting in the vacuum of space without any form of oxygen to breathe. What was supposed to be a glorious escape has now turned into a disaster. Things have certainly changed, and if things weren't bad enough already, 2 hunting sentinels are coming after them, hot in pursuit. But luckily, as the 3 of them soon find out, Stephen Lang did not send these sentinels after them to kill them, but to rescue them from their imminent death instead. When they get brought back on board of the space station, it becomes clear that the 3 of them are all suffering from extreme exposure. Stephen Lang then points out to them that they should consider themselves lucky to be alive, and he trusts that they have learned their lesson now, that there is no escape from here, not now and not ever. Back on Earth though, things have also changed. Where only minutes ago, Cyclops and the remaining members of the team on Earth were entirely lost as to where their fellow X-Men and Jean could have been taken by the Sentinels. The mutant detecting supercomputer Cerebro had not been able to find any trace of them anywhere on Earth. But apparently, that is precisely where the problem lies. Up until they had gotten a visitor in the form of Dr. Corbeau, no one expected the missing mutants to not be on Earth, but in space instead. Dr. Peter Corbeau is not sure of this, but it's certainly worth investigating. With his extensive network, his influence reaches deep within the government, being able to open doors which would normally remain closed to the average citizen. But as it seems, Xavier himself apparently has a certain kind of clearance as well, since Corbeau is able to hook Cerebro up to NORAD's main databank in Valhalla Mountain. A location Cyclops is all too familiar with, since that's the place where Thunderbird, one of his team members, recently died in a plane crash during a battle with Count Nefaria. What they find out, by asking the right questions and tracing the material which was used to building the Sentinels, is the exact location where these Sentinels are staged. And as it turns out, it's an orbital station. And not just any, it's actually S.H.I.E.L.D's orbital station. Later that evening, a news broadcast reports of an imminent launch of a shuttle, regardless of the heavy and hazardous current solar activity. The shuttle is part of the StarCorps project, and being piloted by none other than Dr. Peter Corbeau, and it's about to lift off. But in the meantime, the broadcast switches over to a reporter who tells about the widespread anti-mutant hysteria which has swept over the country ever since the Sentinels reappeared in New York during last Christmas Eve. It's clearly getting out of hand, with attacks on individuals and also the home of federal judge Robert Chalmers, who has been very vocal about the anti-mutant movement, has gotten firebombed. But luckily no one was home at that time. The reporter then gets interrupted by the news anchor because there's an update on the StarCorps shuttle launch. A mixed team of 4 men and a woman are currently boarding the ship. He adds that this launch was scheduled with unusual speed by StarCorps, and because of this, little is known about their mission and the crew itself. In any event, more information will follow, as they will be covering the launch in detail. Inside the ship, we find out that this team are actually the X-Men, who will join Corbeau into space. Storm is happy that she can finally take her helmet off, now that they're inside and out of the camera's reach. If she would have had to endure being trapped inside of it any longer, she would have started screaming. Nightcrawler asks if Corbeau won't be getting into trouble for doing this, and he says that he thinks he's a good friend. He then takes a look at Pyotr, who's sitting next to him, and asks him why he doesn't remove his helmet. He doesn't look good, and he started to break a sweat. The preparations for the launch continue as Kurt wants to ask Pyotr if he's doing alright. But Pyotr is not doing well at all. He transforms his body into organic metal, which rips his spacesuit to pieces, and shouts out the name Mikhail. Kurt asks him what's going on, and Colossus tells his friend that he's sorry, he didn't mean to, and that he was afraid. Colossus then confides in his teammates, and tells them that as they're sitting here inside this rocket, all he can think of is his older brother Mikhail, who was a test pilot and one of Russia's first cosmonauts, but he died. Burned alive on a launch pad when his rocket exploded. The two of them were really close. They were the only thing they had. Peter Corbeau tells him that he understands. He himself remembers the Apollo 1 fire and his friends whom we lost on that day as well. At that moment, there's a voice coming from the communication system, telling them that the countdown is at T-minus 1 minute and all systems are go. During the final 5 seconds of the countdown, right before liftoff, all crew members are lost in thought, each with their own personal perspective on the current situation, with some of them being excited to embark on this adventure, while others are anxious and scared. And with a barrage of lights and sound, the shuttle lifts off. Its passengers on a deadly serious mission to leave Earth and join the stars in space to find and rescue their friends and teammates. Despite some fear and doubts, the rockets with the shuttle lifts off and everything is going according to plan. We then quickly shift to another one of Starcore's orbital stations, but this time to one that orbits the Sun. The personnel aboard that vessel are shocked by the intensity of the sun flares which are currently being unleashed by Earth's sun. They are off the scales. The situation is escalating and it's becoming a lot worse than anticipated. So bad that Peter Corbeau is actually flying straight into the worst solar storm in living memory. Inside Corbeau's shuttle, Nightcrawler tries to comfort Colossus by joking around a bit. But Colossus is not in the mood at all. He has started to feel strange and is getting quite sick. Corbeau tells him it's a mild form of space sickness, and his body is reacting and adapting to zero gravity. But it's nothing to worry about, he assures him. He then tells everyone to be quiet because he has a priority message from Starcore incoming. Back on Earth, half a planet away from Starcore, in a village located close to Dublin, Ireland named Elroon, someone steps into a local post office. The weather is pretty bad, and the man gets told by the clerk to quickly close the door already. He says he's sorry, and introduces himself as Flaherty and that he's a legal representative. He drops off a letter addressed to Sean Cassidy, and tells the clerk that it's imperative that it gets delivered to his client without delay. As he walks out of the post office again, he makes clear once more the urgency of the delivery, which doesn't go down well with the clerk at all. As Flaherty leaves and walks through the storm, he suddenly gets approached by someone. They seem to know one another, and Flaherty tells the man that he's too late, and that his cousin has already been warned and that he will stop his mad plans. But the man, who identifies himself as Black Tom, then shoots Flaherty with some kind of wooden cane, and says that his cousin will die if he's trying to stop his plans instead. "1,347 miles above the Earth, the former SHIELD space platform circles the planet. Over the years, many people have visited it, including people in politics and scientists, but also the Avengers. But that was years ago, before budget cuts which forced SHIELD to abandon it, and years before Project Armageddon came into existence. Inside the space platform, one of the video screens is showing a space shuttle approaching, and Stephen Lang wants to know what that shuttle is doing here. He soon finds out that the shuttle belongs to Starcore, and that its pilot is requesting sanctuary, seeking shelter from the solar radiation levels which are moving into the danger zone. Lang responds by saying that they are a top-secret United States government installation, and since they have foreign people on board, that sanctuary is being denied to them. One of Lang's technicians then tells him that the mutant detector is going off like crazy, which must mean that the shuttle is crammed with mutants. Lang orders him to send out the Sentinels then, which he does. The X-Men and Corbeau quickly fully suit up, but Nightcrawler asks what about Colossus, since his pressure suit has been ripped apart earlier. He will not stand a chance if they get hit. Corbeau tells him that he will just not have to get hit then. He then starts maneuvering the shuttle, trying to evade the Sentinel's attack, which he manages to do, but only for so long. The shuttle gets hit and it shatters the hull. Nightcrawler warns Storm to be careful because the Sentinel's energy beam cut her lifeline, but it's no use. The explosive decompression pulls Storm through the hole in the hull and hurls her into space. Cyclops tells Corbeau to hurry up and get them inside the station, because not only have they lost Storm, but Colossus is starting to suffocate. As the shuttle is still being followed by Sentinels, Corbeau rams the shuttle into the walls of the space station, telling everyone that they will not be able to use the shuttle to go home anymore. This tactic prohibits the Sentinels outside in space to prevent the mutant incursion, and they have now not only rammed the orbital space station, but invaded it as well. One of the Sentinels is going after Storm. This is the first time Storm is outside of Earth's atmosphere, and she wonders if she will be able to control cosmic storms just like she's able to control storms on Earth. She soon finds out that she can, which is a good thing or she would have been done for. Not only is Storm able to use the cosmic storms to fly herself around in space, but she also manages to tap into other cosmic energies, and starts to attack the Sentinel with a form of energy it has not encountered before. It cannot compensate for this phenomenon, and as it is being blasted halfway through space, the robot actually starts to scream. It sounds to Storm as a shriek of fear, as if it is human, and as she's making her way back to the space station, she wonders if this is the way she wants to live and honor her parents' memory, namely to break the oath she swore so long ago, the oath to never take another's life. She knows that in this case it was only a robot, but it does make her wonder. Sooner or later, her duty as an X-Man might require her to do so eventually. And perhaps, then it would be better if she would stop being an X-Man. Inside the space station, a massive battle has unfolded. The X-Men have started their assault and are attacking both Sentinels and Lang's personnel. One of the Sentinels has gotten a hold of Cyclops and is spraying him with anesthetic gas. Nightcrawler sees this happening, grabs the pipe and leaps at the Sentinel holding Cyclops. He then uses the pipe to violently smash the Sentinel's head in. This liberates his team leader, who was holding his breath, and he is thankful for the save. He tells Nightcrawler to be careful though, because he's not in the circus anymore. Nightcrawler tells him that he's been a showman all of his life, and that he's not about to change that. Not for him, and not for anyone. Showmanship and acrobatics are in his blood. As he's saying this, he pushes Cyclops out of harm's way and evades another Sentinel's attack. That Sentinel keeps charging at him, and Colossus tells him to quickly use the move they've been working on in the danger room together, as he steps on a piece of debris that's lying around. Nightcrawler knows precisely which move Colossus is speaking of, and uses his momentum to launch Colossus in the air, by jumping on the other side of the beam. This maneuver propels Colossus with a lot of speed, straight at the Sentinel that was chasing Nightcrawler. He curls himself up, basically becoming a human cannibal of organic metal. And the impact rips the Sentinel's head right off. Cyclops takes care of the last Sentinel by simply blasting it with his optic blast. He mentions that they dealt with these Sentinels really fast, over a dozen Sentinels in no time. All of this went a lot easier than it was supposed to. No way near the Sentinels they have fought before. It all just went a bit too easy for Cyclops, which begs the question what the real threat in all of this is. He has a feeling they will all find out soon enough when they have found Jean and the others. Colossus then asks him what about Storm though. She is still adrift in outer space and she could be hurt for all they know. Cyclops tells him to back off because he knows how he feels. Colossus is getting angry with Cyclops at this point and tells him he knows nothing about how he feels. He says that she's their friend, their comrade in battle, and she could be dead. And Cyclops acts like he doesn't even care. But Colossus does care. But at that point they find out that Storm is just fine, as she's standing behind them breathing and alive and well. Colossus picks her up and tells her that this is too wonderful to be true, because he thought she was doomed when he saw her get blown out of the spaceship. She tells him that she has always been difficult to kill, but that the Sentinel she faced in space was easier to survive than his Barog. At that moment, Cyclops is overcome by a telepathic distress signal from Jean. All kinds of images flood his brain and she tells him to come help them. Time is running out for her and Professor Xavier, and she can barely maintain contact. She then tells him where both Banshee and Wolverine are located, as well as her and Professor Xavier's location, and she tells him to hurry up because Stephen Lang is coming for them and he means to murder them. Cyclops then addresses his teammates. He tells Storm, Colossus and Nightcrawler to follow the signs down to the B-deck, where they will find Wolverine and Banshee. Once they've broken them free from the holding cells, they can all join him in the main mission control room. He tells them to move it because they have no time to waste. Storm is worried about leaving Cyclops all by himself, considering they don't know if there are any more Sentinels around. Cyclops tells her that if there are, he will handle them by himself. But right now, he has given them a direct order and they should obey it. As for Stephen Lang, the so-called head honcho of the space station, he wants them to leave Lang for Cyclops himself. They then split up and Cyclops tells Corbeau to come with him. Corbeau asks Cyclops if he doesn't think he was a bit too rough on his teammates, but he quickly realizes that Cyclops has a lot more on his mind at this moment than cordial tact. And Cyclops doesn't even bother with answering him. A bit later, at the main mission control room, Lang is talking to himself. Realizing the notes he used from the original creator of the Sentinels must have been incomplete, since the Sentinels he recreated apparently are second-rate. But it doesn't really matter though. He has extracted all the necessary data he needed from the mutants, which makes the two mutants still in captivity right here, namely Professor Xavier and Jean Grey, expendable. He plans on shooting them dead, and he tells Jean that their friends might have taken the station, but she will not be alive to share in their victory. And then, the blast door to the room gets ripped off. It might have been able to withstand most blasts, but not the unleashed fury of Cyclops' concussive optic blast. He then blasts Lang, disarming him, and tells Corbeau to set Jean and Xavier free. He then picks up Lang and punches him, which launches Lang in the machinery standing there behind him. Cyclops asks Lang how it feels to be facing someone one-on-one, someone who is actually able to fight back. In his rage, he keeps on punching Lang, over and over and over, while telling him to answer him. Jean, who is standing behind him, tells him to stop it because he's killing him, and Lang is in no shape to answer, all bruised and bloodied up. She then urgently tells Cyclops to look behind him, because there's someone in the next room. He asks her if it's another Sentinel, but before she can answer, Cyclops gets attacked, knocking him out cold. Jean recognizes who it is, and she says to please not be him. But Lang, who is starting to get up behind her, tells her that yes, it is. This is the ultimate irony. The ultimate, unbeatable enemy. This is the heart of Project Armageddon. Not those Sentinels which turned out to be quite a disappointment though. Resistance is futile, Lang tells her, and he continues by saying that her mental powers are now being neutralized by a mind not unlike her own. And this results in her not being able to warn the rest of the X-Men, as Jean finds out quickly enough. Lang then tells his pets to take Jean away and to prepare her, because the final act is about to begin. As the rest of the X-Men arrive, joined by Banshee and Wolverine, they cannot believe what they are seeing. Not sure if this is some form of a joke or a nightmare. What they find themselves now is standing face to face with the original X-Men team. Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Angel, Beast, Iceman and Professor Xavier himself. Both groups of mutants consider themselves to be the true X-Men and the other team a bunch of imposters. And Professor Xavier tells his original students to attack this team of imposters and to show them the same mercy as they would get. He tells them to attack and kill them all. Issue number 100. It's X-Men versus X-Men, and the current X-Men team find themselves pitted against the original members. And all this has been orchestrated by Stephen Lang, the head of Project Armageddon. Staged on the long-abandoned SHIELD orbital platform in space, Stephen Lang's maniacal laughter is echoing through the darkened corridors. In a few moments, X-Men will be killing X-Men. And once that battle is done, no power on Earth will be able to stop him from achieving his ultimate goal, namely the extermination of the whole of mutant kind. Stephen Lang has won. Strongly convinced that the opposing party are the imposters, both teams of X-Men attack one another. The current roster of the X-Men, who have all been recruited by Professor Xavier recently to help liberate the members of the old team, have no problem defending themselves. But they would prefer to resolve the situation without having to fight. The team of the original members, aided by Havoc and Polaris however, have a frantic look in their eyes and are aiming to kill. And they are being cheered on by the one man who was supposed to be everyone's teacher, Professor Charles Xavier. The acrobatic German and former circus artist Kurt Wagner, or Nightcrawler, is being attacked by Hank McCoy, otherwise known as the Beast, but is able to leap out of the way and cling to the walls. Nightcrawler has never met the Beast, but he does recognize him from some old photographs which are hanging in the halls of the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. One thing Kurt doesn't understand is that he had heard that the Beast not only joined the Avengers, but is supposed to be covered in fur now. As Nightcrawler is surprised by Beast's speed and agility, he gets told by Beast that he was never Harry at all, and the Beast is able to make his way to Nightcrawler and kick him hard, launching him backwards and slamming him into Cyclops, who didn't even see that coming. Kurt, who still doesn't understand why the man who was supposed to be the leader of his X-Men team only minutes ago is now trying to kill him and his teammates, asks Cyclops why it is that they are fighting among themselves. What about the threat of Stephen Lang and the Sentinels? Being this up close to Cyclops, Nightcrawler notices something is off. His visor does not look the same. But when he asks Cyclops what happened to it, he gets blasted by him. Point blank. Cyclops then says to Nightcrawler that he is wrong. He himself is the threat, and this is where he gets eliminated. Wolverine sees this happening to his teammate and can tell that he's down and not moving. He himself is being attacked by the Iceman, who tells Wolverine he'd better worry about himself because he's about to be permanently put on ice. But Wolverine does not allow him the time to do that, as he keeps clawing away at the ice that's being generated by Iceman. The Angel lifts Wolverine up and pulls him away from Iceman. Wolverine tells him to put him down or he will clip his wings for good. Warren doesn't like being threatened, and if Wolverine wants to be put down, he will gladly oblige, and he throws Wolverine right into his Russian teammate Colossus, who cannot get away in time, and they both slam into the machinery behind him. Colossus notices the hatred in Angel's voice, and asks Wolverine if he noticed it too, which he did, and he tells Colossus to clear them away from the rubble they are buried under, because the Angel owes him a rematch. Colossus uses his strength to do just that, and Wolverine tells him to execute the fastball special. A combined maneuver where Colossus throws Wolverine like he would a baseball, and Wolverine gets launched at Angel with his claws extended. Havoc then starts blasting Colossus full power. If Colossus had not been in his armored form, he would have surely gotten burned to a crisp. Even in armored form, which does have its limits, he can feel Havoc's blast is causing him pain. He will not be able to stand much more of this raw cosmic power. But he will stand and must survive. As he's coming for Havoc, he tells him he will not be stopped. This is the second time Havoc has tried to kill them in cold blood. People will call them a comrade and a friend even, without a reason or an explanation. No mercy, just mad, uncontrolled butchery. To Colossus, Havoc is now beneath contempt, and he swears that from this day forward, he will not butcher anyone anymore. He makes his way towards him, picks up a beam of metal, and strikes Havoc with it. Storm is getting attacked by Marvel Girl, and she can tell that her power seems weaker than usual. She could deal with her easily, but she can't bring herself to harm her friend. She figures she'd better use reason instead. She asks Jean why she has turned against her friends, but Jean responds that they are not her friends and calls Storm a witch. Aurora asks her what about the hours they spent together, confiding in one another, but Jean tells her that she's a liar, that she doesn't know her, never talked to her, and certainly never shared a confidence with her. She tells Aurora that this is a cheap shot and it won't work. Aurora is amazed at how Jean could deny truth like that, and with such a hateful look in her eyes and hatred in her voice. How could her being held captive for this short period of time have changed her so much? How could it make her act so unlike herself? Unless Storm thinks she isn't herself at all. At least, not her true self. She then realizes that Jean must be an imposter and is not her friend at all. But as she comes to this realization, she gets hit from behind with all kinds of metallic rubble, courtesy of Lorna Dane, the mutant called Polaris. Jean tells her that was a beautiful move, and now that Storm is down and helpless, they should finish her off. And Storm thinks to herself that she has no chance of escape whatsoever, because she can't break free with her legs being pinned underneath the debris. With these two women now coming to kill her, she has no chance of escape at all. Luckily for Storm though, the two women then get attacked from behind themselves. Banshee and Colossus have made their way to Storm, and are able to drive Marvel Girl and Polaris away from her, who will then regroup with the others and plan for another attack to finish these imposters. Banshee tells the two women, as he keeps on attacking them with his sonic scream, they should run and hide and be thankful that he doesn't like to kill. Colossus frees Storm from the metallic debris, and Sean tells them that they will be back for another attack soon. Their only chance to survive this ordeal is to fight as a team, and he asks where Wolverine has gone to. But Wolverine is heading for the top man. He's calling out Xavier, and tells him that he's burning on a short fuse. Xavier has about 3 seconds left to provide some answers, but Xavier is not impressed by Wolverine's threats at all. He stands up and tells Wolverine that as a matter of fact, he's very little impressed with him as a whole. One of Xavier's mind blasts has the power to shrivel Wolverine where he stands. But he tells the little man that all he really deserves is the power of his fist, and he knocks Wolverine down. Xavier then tells him to get up, because he wants the satisfaction of knocking him down once more. Wolverine was surprised with Xavier standing up and hitting him the first time around, and he compliments Xavier on the punch, but he will not be knocked down that easily a second time. He then gets attacked by Marvel Girl, who has made her way back to Xavier. She tells Wolverine that he actually is going down once more, but this time he will not be getting up, ever again. Xavier says that Wolverine will not stand a chance against her mental powers, and he seems to be right about that. Wolverine's brain feels like it's burning. He can't think straight and only has his instincts to guide him. His instincts and his senses. Jean has him dropped on the floor, and she tells the professor that it will not be long now. But Wolverine, trusting on his instinct and senses, can see things clearly now. He is like an animal and doesn't know people solely by their faces, but by the combination of what all of his senses tell him. Sense, feelings, voices, and he knows Jean Grey. And whatever this is, it's certainly not Jean Grey, as he jumps towards her and plunges his 2 sets of claws right in her chest. She doesn't even have time to scream, and the members of both X-Men teams look shocked at the sight of what just unfolded right in front of them. Banshee asks him what he has done and calls him a bloody homicidal maniac. Stephen Lang, who has been watching this whole battle royale unfold from a safe distance, cannot see what just happened, and commands the computer to shift to a different camera and display it on screen. He then sees Wolverine standing over Marvel Girl's body with her chest torn open. Wolverine found out that Marvel Girl was apparently actually a machine, a robot. This did not come as a surprise to Lang, of course, because this had been part of Project Armageddon all along. With Jean, Scott and Xavier as his prisoners, he replaced them with a new type of Sentinels, and he calls them his X-Sentinels. And according to him, these X-Sentinels were a stroke of genius. The ultimate in anti-mutant technology. They should have been unbeatable and they should have killed the new X-Men team, not the other way around. But this game is far from over. He then starts to address his prisoners, Scott, Jean and Dr. Corball, who all look shocked. He says that they shouldn't be. His goal had always been the complete and total extermination of mutant kind and not just investigating it. Even though he had started out as the head of a government project that was trying to determine why mutants exist, he soon became convinced that mutants were an absolute threat to humanity as a whole. This started when his position gave him access to Larry Trask's base, where Lang found all of his notes, and Larry was the inventor of the original Sentinels. After reading these notes, he soon became convinced that he had to do something and determined to deal with the mutant threat. He then became involved with the secretive Council of Chosen, who had their own plans for the mutants. They offered Steven all the money, material, and all the help he needed, not realizing that he would betray them. This council wanted to control mutant kind and all the powers that came with it, for their own benefit. Steven, however, simply wanted all mutants dead, and to achieve this goal, he created these X-Sentinels in secret. To ironically use mutant kind's strongest defenders, the X-Men, as its executioners. And who better for their first victims than the real X-Men team? While the already busted up Lang is on his rant, he didn't notice the tube in which he was keeping Cyclops captive has started glowing, to the point of becoming red hot, until it finally shatters apart, and he is once more faced with a furious Cyclops, who had already beaten him to a pulp earlier. But before he aims his I-beams at Lang, he first liberates Jean, Corbeau, and the unconscious Professor Xavier from their tubes as well. Before Cyclops can turn his attention back on Lang, he's already trying to run away and escape. Cyclops calls him a coward, and Lang asks him how he dares call him a coward. He is a man, which is more than Cyclops will ever be, and he calls him a mutant swine. Lang feels that he is better than all of them, and now that he has reached his flying gunship, he will prove just that. While the big screen shows the other X-Men are taking care of Lang's X-Sentinels, Lang himself is firing away at Cyclops. Cyclops tells him that he's not proving anything, apart from how sick and twisted inside he is. Cyclops says that he has fought many villains in his time, but until he met Lang, he has never hated anyone. Lang would hound mutants down, exterminate them, for the sole reason of being born different, and according to Lang, inferior to his conception of humanity. Jean then helps Scott out by using her telekinetic powers to take control over Lang's gunship, and tells him that he will not be killing anyone today. He tries to regain control and counter Jean's powers by hitting full power on the thrusters, but he soon finds out that the controls are jammed and he can no longer turn. He starts screaming, asking for anyone to help him. He's so desperate that he's even asking the X-Men for help now. But it's no use. It's too late and he's heading on a collision course with the screen. One big explosion follows, throwing Jean, Scott, and Corbeau, who's carrying Xavier, off their feet. They soon get found by the rest of the team, and Benji tells everyone to help them out because they have to leave. This whole section of the space station is on fire and is spreading fast. Lang's personnel have already evacuated the station in re-entry lifeboats, and they are the only ones left, aboard a space station that could blow itself to bits any minute now. A few minutes later, they have made their way to the shuttle they came here on, and Cyclops tells Corbeau to hurry up because they do not have much time left. Corbeau tells him that they have all the time in the world, because this ship is not going to take them anywhere. The flight control computer must have gotten damaged during the Sentinel attack when they got here, and without it, they are as good as finished. Wolverine asks him what about manual re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere, but Corbeau tells him there's a huge hole in the shuttle's hull as well, and they have no functional pressure suits. Apart from that, there's also this little thing about the solar flares going on. And since they have no computer to fly them through it, they cannot sit safely in the shuttle's shielded life cell. Corbeau could perform the re-entry, but it would not last 30 seconds in the flare. And even if one of the X-Men might survive it, they don't even know how to fly the shuttle. Jean then tells him that he's wrong. She could actually pull both things off. Cyclops, shocked by Jean's suggestion, asks her if she's gone crazy. He asks her since when she became a qualified astronaut, and Jean tells him, since right now. She tells Corbeau to hold still, and this will only hurt a little, as she uses her telepathic powers to absorb all Peter Corbeau knows about flying the space shuttle instantly, with this info dump, she won't be the best pilot out there, but it will be good enough to get them back to Earth. Cyclops can tell how serious she is about this and grabs her firmly by the shoulders and asks her how she will survive the solar flare. Jean tells him that shielding herself with the telekinetic powers will keep the harmful radiation out. It'll be alright. But for how long, Scott asks her. Her powers can't handle that much, and then he passes out cold. Jean telepathically turns his lights out to stop any further unnecessary discussion about this, and she tells Banshee to take him to the life cell. Banshee can tell that she hit him hard, and she meant to do just that. By the time he wakes up, they will be committed to what Jean has planned. As Jean makes the preparations for the flight, Wolverine walks up to her and asks her if she's aiming to be the Mother of the Year. She tells him to make it quick with whatever he has to say, because she's busy. He asks her what she's trying to prove, because this is clearly suicide. Jean tells him that she has about had it with Wolverine's attitude. She has tried to like him, but he's just a little obnoxious upstart, and she doesn't even understand why she tried her best to like him to begin with. She tells him to shut his mouth and get into the life cell, before she loses her temper even more. As Wolverine walks off, Jean now gets approached by Ororo. She asks Ororo to please not give her a hard time as well, because she couldn't bear that. Someone has to do this, and she has the best chance of survival. She has to be the one to do this. It's that simple. All Ororo does is give her a hug and ask for the gods to protect her. Jean thanks her for her support, and as they both start crying, she asks Ororo to do her one last favor, namely to tell Scott that she loved him. It is now time for Jean to prove her worth. First, she telekinetically seals the gaping hole in the hull with a piece of the wreckage. She then uses the knowledge of piloting the ship to break away from the space station. Luckily, they built the shuttle to be able to take a lot of punishment, because it doesn't even look scratched, regardless of the collision. She then gets real serious. According to Starcore, the flare is only a minute away, and it'll be at least half an hour before they're safe again. She is now getting scared, because she does not want to die. In the meantime, inside the life cell, Scott has regained consciousness and he wants to open the cell. Both Nightcrawler and Colossus are holding him back, because that would kill them all. They understand Scott's pain, but they can't let him go, no matter how hard he screams for it. He tells them that they have to let him go before it's too late, but Kurt tells him, while tears are running down his face, that it already is too late. Scott stops struggling as he keeps begging Kurt to let him go. 27 minutes left to go, and the shuttle's cockpit is lighting up from the energy of Jean using all her telekinetic mutant abilities to keep her safe from harm. 27 minutes is not that long. She keeps her telekinetic shield up and keeps on flying the shuttle through the flare. But Corbeau wasn't kidding. She can tell that even though the flare is only barely there, it's already pushing her powers to the limit. The only consolation Jean has is that she just knows that even Colossus would not have been able to withstand this much radiation. She tells herself to hold on for the love of everything she holds dear. She just has to hold on. 20 minutes to go now. Only 20 minutes more. But the strain is becoming harder to bear. She can hear the impact of the cosmic radiation as her shield is starting to give way. The flare and the radiation are starting to get through, and she hopelessly yells out for Scott. Issue number 101. Love and hate. Two of the most powerful driving forces in the universe. Human beings will go to extreme lengths, motivated by either one of these powerful and complex emotions. And in the case of Jean Grey, the both of them have led to the last moments of this young woman's life. For the past 20 minutes, her love for the X-Men, and especially their team leader Scott Summers, has pushed her to potentially sacrifice herself to get them safely back home to planet Earth. In the past couple of days, she and some of the X-Men had been captured and abducted to an orbital space station by the filled with hate mad scientist Dr. Stephen Lang. Lang had set out to destroy the entire mutant race through his Project Armageddon. After the X-Men were able to liberate themselves, they tried to get away using a damaged shuttle. Because of the damage sustained to the shuttle, everyone had to place themselves in the radiation-proof life cell, leaving only Jean to pilot the ship while using her telekinetic powers to shield herself from the solar radiation. She was fully aware of the risks involved, but figured she would be able to pull herself and her close friends and lover through. It was an all-or-nothing gamble, and she could feel the impact of the radiation instantly, until it became too much for her to handle. She may have been able to save her friends, as she managed to pilot the shuttle back into the Earth's atmosphere. But for Jean Grey herself though, as the shuttle is making its way towards Kennedy Airport, it gets picked up on the radar of the air traffic controllers. Not knowing the origin of the blip on their screens, an alert air traffic controller hits the panic button, clearing all traffic from the unknown flying object's trajectory. Only barely re-entering in one piece, but still flying at a high velocity, the shuttle almost comes apart in mid-air. And when it finally does touch down, it does so with way too much speed, and pretty much gets torn apart as it crash lands on the runway of Kennedy Airport. The X-Men aboard the shuttle had not expected to make it this far. While they were locked up in the isolated life cell, the radiation sensors went off the scale, indicating that Jean's telekinetic shield did not hold, that she must have died and that they would meet a similar fate, with no one to pilot the ship. When they found themselves within the Earth's atmosphere, the ship was obviously still under human control. They figured they might still have a chance after all. Or so they thought until the landing. After the initial crash, the shuttle scrapes the runway, seemingly not slowing down, and as it is leaving behind a trail of wreckage and burning fuel across the heart of Kennedy Airport's runway, it slams right through the last crash barrier, launching itself over Jamaica Bay. It bounces several times on the surface of the water, 3 times to be exact, right before it sinks. And then, Starcore Eagle 1 is gone. Oil slick starts to spread, and that's about all that's happening for a while. This seems to be the end of the X-Men. But then again, the X-Men have always been notoriously hard to kill, as Cyclops is the first one of them to reach the surface, gasping for air, yelling out he made it, and one by one the others follow. Nightcrawler, Storm, Wolverine, Banshee and Colossus, even Peter Corbeau with Professor Xavier, they all made it. All of them are safe. All of them, apart from the one woman who managed to get them all back to Earth, and Cyclops is going back down to the shuttle's wreckage to look for her. Kurt asks him if he's gone crazy. There's nothing Scott can do for her now. Not after the radiation and the crash, he tells him. Where Kurt had held Scott back once before inside the shuttle, he gets warned by Scott that if he gets in his way again now, if he tries to hold him back again, he will kill him this time around. Pyotr then tells everyone to look, because something seems to be happening with the water right above where the shuttle sank down. And as the X-Men are wondering what's happening now, the garbage strewn in oily murky water starts to glow with iridescent rainbow fire. Until it finally explodes, and the woman they knew as Jean Grey now launches herself out from the water, high up in the air, and shouts at the X-Men that she is no longer the woman they knew. That she is fire and life incarnate, and that now and forever she is the Phoenix. And as soon as she has risen, she is overcome. Her mind is burning with memories and emotions, with excruciating pain inside tearing her apart. She asks what is happening to her and what she has done, and she plummets back into the water, yelling out for Scott. And Scott yells out for her as well, swimming his way towards her. And as he grabs her, he tells her that she is safe now, and that they are all back on Earth and that she's going to be alright. But as he notices she's lying really still in the water, barely breathing and hardly any pulse, Scott tells himself to stop thinking like that and that she will pull through. That she has got to pull through. As he carries her to the shore, Colossus asks him about the costume she is wearing, but Cyclops is as confused about all of this as he is. Jean seemingly created a new costume out of nothing and is using powers which she never had before. And then there is the not so simple fact of her being alive. But maybe, instead of asking questions, they should just be happy with the fact that she even is still alive. After they have arrived on the shore, Xavier tells his X-Men that they will have to deal with one problem at a time, and for now, they should disguise themselves. It would be better for everyone if there are less superpowered costume beings present when the police arrive to the scene. Nightcrawler uses his image inducer to change his appearance, and Storm repolarizes the unstable molecules of her costume to appear as a Starcore uniform. But Corbeau says that he's afraid that disguises won't do them much good at all, since this is the second time the X-Men have made a mess out of Kennedy Airport in a really short time. Not only do the first responders arrive, but crowds start to gather as well. And suddenly confusion hits them all, as Professor Xavier uses mental powers in such a way that no one remembers the X-Men being there to begin with. And the X-Men are able to slip away from the crash site, leaving Peter Corbeau as a shuttle sole survivor, and the X-Men free to live their own lives once more. In the case of the mutant, known only as Wolverine, this means buying a bouquet of flowers. When the clerk asks him if it's for a sick friend, Wolverine tells him it's none of his business and to just take the money for the flowers. Wolverine then proceeds on his way to the hospital, thinking how out of character he is acting, like a school kid, still wet behind the ears for some girl, and he asks himself what Jean Grey is to him anyway. He finds himself liking her and wanting her, and as with all things, what Wolverine wants, he gets. He thinks to himself that he's never felt like this before. He has never cared about anybody and has always liked being a loner. He plans on surprising Jean with these flowers and maybe then have a talk with her. But when he opens the door to the wing she's in, he finds out that he wasn't the only one wanting to visit her. The rest of the X-Men, as well as Professor Xavier and Moira McTaggart, are here as well. He should have probably expected them to be here, to stay as close to her as possible until they know if she will be alright or not. But then again, maybe he shouldn't have expected this to be the case, because after all, Wolverine has never had any friends. Life and death have always been quite meaningless to him, easily disposed of, just like the flowers he had just bought. As he's throwing them away, Moira asks Xavier if there's nothing he can do for Jean, since the doctors have been with her for such a long time. Xavier tells her that he wishes he could, but he can't. Every time he tries to use his powers, his mind gets violently disturbed by this cursed dream of his. Even a minor thing, such as the mass hypnosis he used to get the X-Men away from the airport, almost brought on another seizure. For all the love that he has for Jean Grey, he cannot help her. He can't even help himself. The hours pass, all through the night and the morning of the next day, and they don't get any news. All they know is that Jean is still alive, and all they can do for now is wait. Kurt feels sorry for Scott, who is such a man of action, and this endless waiting must be like a living hell for him. Scott, who is sitting on a chair all by himself, is reminiscing about the two of them, how they wasted all those years, secretly loving each other, but not having the sense to actually voice it to one another. And now, if she dies, it will all have been for nothing, and without the love of his life around, Scott's life will grow dark. When Jean left the X-Men to move to the city to build a life for herself, he let her go, because he thought that being the leader of the X-Men was what gave his life meaning. He only now realizes that that wasn't the case at all. It had actually always been Jean, and he finds that out now when he's about to lose her forever. Scott then hears a voice that tells Peter Corbeau that it's not like him to argue with reality, or to deny the evidence that he's seeing. Dr. Mackay and Corbeau approach Scott and he asks them how Jean is doing. Mackay tells him that it will be touch and go for a while, but with the rest, proper care and her friends to look after her, he and Corbeau think that Jean is going to be just fine. And everyone starts cheering and couldn't be more happy and relieved with the news, apart from one person, that is. Scott has quietly slipped away while the rest were celebrating. Kurt could tell that the good news hit him hard, and he follows Scott to check up on him. Scott being this rattled isn't surprising to Kurt at all, as the strain of the past couple of days have been eating at Scott. When Kurt looks into the room where Scott is in, he can see the man falling on his knees. Kurt understands that this is one of those times where a man needs to be left alone, and closes the door. Scott is now crying, thanking God for the fact that Jean is going to be alright. In the adjoining room, Kurt tells Xavier that Scott will be joining them in a minute. Xavier then snappily tells them all that he doesn't need Scott here to say what he is going to say, but he will need them all to quiet down first. He apologizes for his rudeness, but the pressures of the last weeks are beginning to take its toll on Xavier as well, which is part of the reason why he's sending the 5 of them on an enforced vacation. Wolverine then snaps as well. He pops his claws out and tells Xavier to stick it in his ear, because none of them will be going anywhere until Jean is recovered. Xavier tells Wolverine to control himself and to for once in his life listen and think. He repeats how the doctor told them that Jean's recovery depends on the care and attention she receives. Care that Scott and he are prepared to give her, but they can't do that and run the X-Men at the same time, which is why he has decided it's time for them to take a short and well-earned vacation. Either way, he won't have them staying around in the hospital because they will only get in the way. Wolverine then retracts his claws. Sean says that Xavier is the boss, even if he himself isn't so sure he agrees. What he does know is that if Xavier is undecided on where to send them for their vacation, he might just have a suggestion. Sean tells Xavier that he has received a letter from his lawyer, Mr. Flaherty, telling him that he has inherited the Cassidy ancestral home. It's located in a remote part of Ireland at the Atlantic coast with few conveniences and even fewer people. Xavier asks if he can see the letter and thanks Sean for the suggestion. They will all leave as soon as the arrangements have been made, and Xavier bids them a good time while being there. Somewhat reluctantly, the X-Men return back to the Xavier mansion in Westchester, where they find out that all of them now apparently have American identities and American passports to go along with them. Their moods have begun to change some once they have flown into Dublin and have spent a week sightseeing in Ireland's capital, right before they head down to County Mayo, where the Cassidy ancestral home is located. When they get off the train in Ballina, they rent a car for the last part of the trip, and some of the X-Men are actually starting to enjoy themselves some. But not all of them though, as Wolverine is complaining to Sean about the bumps in the road, and Aurora isn't liking it much either. Wolverine asks Sean if he has never learned to drive, but he responds by saying that this is how they build their roads, with actual character. And Aurora says that they should have built their cars to match them, by adding springs and softer seats for example. She would have preferred flying here, if it hadn't been for Professor Xavier telling them to not draw any attention to themselves. Pyotr makes a joke about Xavier not being here, riding this 4-wheeled torture chamber, but Sean tells them all that their torment is almost over, because they have arrived to Cassidy Keep. It's a castle first built over 1,000 years ago, to defend this part of the coast from Viking invaders. Over the centuries it has been rebuilt several times, as it stood time and time again against every invader who tried to conquer it since. Standing defiant and proud with its tall walls, which are stained with the blood of 100 sieges, and the castle never fell once. The X-Men are amazed at its sight, and Kurt asks Sean if he really grew up here like he told them, and he tells him he did. Kurt says that must have been marvelous, and figures it's now time for him to disguise his features again. Wolverine tells him that in a place like this, Kurt might fit right in just the way he is. Inside the castle there's a man spying on what's going on outside, and he sees the X-Men approach the doorbell, which Sean expects will get answered by Mr. O'Donnell, who will then lower the drawbridge. We then find out that this man is Sean Cassidy's cousin, and he calls himself Black Tom. He has ordered Eamon O'Donnell to escort them in and to make them comfortable, but he is not to give them any form of a sign that anything is amiss. O'Donnell then tells Black Tom that he will not do that. He has done evil things in Tom's service before, but he will not be party in the murder of innocent people. Black Tom then reminds O'Donnell who he is keeping hostage, to assure his good behavior. And as he asks O'Donnell if he dares defy him, Black Tom strikes him with his cane. He tells O'Donnell that he will be party to whatever Black Tom tells him he will be, or he will watch those who love and trust him to die in agony. As O'Donnell is on the floor, Black Tom asks him if he's being clear, and O'Donnell tells him that it's crystal clear to him. Black Tom then gets told by someone else that he's a fool for trusting him, but Tom tells him that he's wrong, because as long as the families are in his power, O'Donnell will do whatever Black Tom commands him to do. Tom says that he would even betray the man he loves like his own son. As the X-Men are looking around inside the castle as they're being escorted in by O'Donnell, Aurora asks how anything could even live or grow here, with this place being nothing but cold, dead stone, and she's getting an unsettling feeling from it. Sean tells her that his boyhood here was the happiest time of his life. How young Sean fought dragons and rescued damsels in distress, but before he can finish the sentence, O'Donnell interrupts him and says that it's time for them to get settled. As they climb the lengthy stairs, Sean asks O'Donnell how the families are doing. The little ones. O'Donnell tells him, with a slight pause, that they are well. They drop off Aurora at her room, and O'Donnell tells her that he trusts her room is satisfactory. Aurora says that her room seems alright, but she doesn't notice that some pointy-eared figures close to the ceiling are spying on them. O'Donnell continues by saying that dinner will be served at 8 and tells the men to follow him to their rooms. Once Aurora is by herself, or at least she thinks she is, she starts talking to herself, commenting on how happy Sean seems to be here back home and that she will only be happy the day she leaves this castle forever. She feels that Cassidy Keep, as Jim would say, has bad vibes for her. It really does. But she will not be ruled by her fears. She must force herself to find a way to relax. She starts using her elemental powers and gets undressed as she creates her own summer shower. This is the best way Aurora knows how to refresh herself and to calm her nerves. She now realizes how much she needed this, and when she closes her eyes she can almost imagine herself being back in Kenya. But this is not Kenya. This is Ireland, and she has a formal dinner planned at 8 o'clock. After she's done taking her shower, she gets dressed, and as she's about to leave, she gets surprised by Kurt teleporting into her room. He has come to escort her to the dinner. Aurora asks Kurt if he will be attending the dinner dressed like this, but Kurt reminds her that he can change his appearance at will with the image inducer he has. He flicks through an induced image of several celebrities, trying to make Aurora laugh. And when he finally settles for a look, Aurora takes off her traditional dress to reveal a more daring dress underneath it, leaving Kurt speechless, which then in turn leaves Aurora somewhat insecure about her looks. She asks Kurt if he thinks she's pretty, and Kurt tells her that she is one of the most beautiful women he has ever had the privilege to know. Still not sure, she thanks him for the compliment if it's a sincere one. In Sean's room, he is getting ready for the dinner as well, but he just can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. Nothing looks out of place, but the way O'Donnell reacted to him, how he froze up for a moment when Sean asked him about the families, just does not sit right with him. Sean figures that he'd best take O'Donnell aside for a bit at the dinner, to get him to level with him. Wolverine and Piotr have come to accompany Sean, and Wolverine asks Sean why he hasn't dressed himself up for the dinner yet, and looks like a stable hand. When Sean tries to explain and calls Wolverine short stuff, Wolverine tells him to watch his mouth. Sean then points out to Wolverine to call him by his name and not call him Irish, like he had been doing. He then says that as the lord of this manor, he can come to the dinner dressed as he pleases. Aurora walks with both Piotr and Kurt arm in arm as they make their way to the dining room. And suddenly, in one of the hallways, a trapdoor opens up, pulling them all down. Sean tells them all to get into their costumes, and Kurt figures that the vacation is over now. They then find themselves in a room, facing not only Black Tom, but an old enemy of the X-Men and Xavier's stepbrother, the unstoppable Juggernaut as well. Black Tom tells them that together they will do what no other villains in the history of the world have been able to do, namely they are going to kill the X-Men. Sean tells his cousin Tom that he's not impressed with all the threats, and asks him if he will be trying to talk them to death. But Black Tom assures them, with them being in the dungeons now, that this castle, with countless tons of rocks between themselves and the world outside, will become their tomb. And suddenly, with the mentioning of the word tomb, Aurora crumbles back to the eerie feeling she had before. And worse. She starts imagining herself getting buried alive, with rocks all around her and no way out. Getting crushed by the rocks, entombing her. She's panicking, she can't breathe and can't think anymore. She asks for her mother to help her in her mind. The rest of the X-Men around her then get shocked by her screaming out in horror, and when they look at her, they find out that Storm is lying helplessly on the floor, clawing at her head. It is clear that Storm has flipped out. Issue number 102. It is clear to the naked eye that Aurora Monroe has lost it. While her teammates Colossus, Nightcrawler and Wolverine are getting smashed by Professor Xavier's stepbrother Kane Marko, who goes by the moniker of the Unstoppable Juggernaut, all she can do is lay on the floor, huddled up against the wall, and cry like a severely traumatized person. But then again, maybe she is. The three X-Men try their best, but they are easily getting swept off their feet. They seem to be outmatched by this one man. So the question remains, who will stop the Juggernaut? It certainly will not be Storm. As if the X-Men don't have their hands full with the Juggernaut alone, he is not their only current problem. Kane Marko's partner in crime and cousin to the X-Men Banshee, Black Tom Cassidy, is most likely the mastermind behind this trap. The X-Men were all invited by Banshee to his inherited ancestral home Cassidy Keep to enjoy a well-earned vacation. And when they let their guard down, they soon paid the price. Black Tom Cassidy and the Juggernaut are taking the X-Men down like they are a bunch of amateurs. And maybe that is exactly what they are. This team of X-Men has not been together for a long time, and even though they have been trained well, drilled even, they do not stand a chance against the veteran Juggernaut. And Black Tom is rubbing it in, telling Sean that they have no chance. The Juggernaut is just so much stronger than the three X-Men combined, and Black Tom just happens to be immune to Sean's own mutant powers, his sonic scream. Every other time the original team of X-Men fought the Juggernaut before, it was always either Professor Xavier's or Jean Grey's mental powers which gave them the upper hand. But neither one of them is here right now, which means they will have to make do with their own skills. Sean is fully aware of Black Tom's immunity to his powers, but he can still use his powers to fly himself around and punch Tom in the face at high velocity. As Nightcrawler does his best to distract the Juggernaut while evading all of his attacks, Piotr asks Storm what's wrong with her and why she is screaming as if she is in mortal pain. But she does not answer. All she can do is ask her mother for help because she's scared, but her mother is not here to help her. Wolverine gets angry with Colossus, asking him what he thinks he's doing. When Colossus says that he just wants to help Storm, Wolverine insults him and tells him to forget about Storm, because the three of them are getting stomped by the Juggernaut. Colossus tells Wolverine to not use that tone of voice with him, and Wolverine says fine, because he has no time for words anymore anyhow. He grabs Colossus by the wrist and arm and leverages him in such a way that he swings Colossus towards the Juggernaut, and uses him as a massive metal projectile while calling him a Rusky. This slur aggravates Colossus even more, and he tells Wolverine to not call him that, and warns him to not ever come between him and his friends again. Wolverine then extends his claws and tells Piotr to just pick a time and place to settle this dispute. Being this focused on one another, neither one of them noticed the Juggernaut got back to his feet again and is now attacking Colossus from behind. He punches him hard and slams him right through a wall. Gloating over how he dealt with Colossus and that nothing can stop him, the Juggernaut now approaches Wolverine, about to smash him as well. But Wolverine does not try to get out of the way, and instead attacks him, curious to find out how the Juggernaut's armor will stand up to his own adamantium claws. As Nightcrawler is tending to Storm, he can tell that Wolverine's attack didn't even slow the Juggernaut down. He realizes that out of the 5 of them, probably only Storm would have a chance of stopping him, but all she still seems to be doing is huddle in a corner and cry. He tries to snap her out of it, and it does seem to have effect. Somewhat. She calls him by his name, but that's about it. He then asks her why she won't help them, since they are clearly getting murdered here. Juggernaut is about to strike Nightcrawler, who is only warned by his taunts just in time for him to move out of the way, making the Juggernaut punch a hole in the wall right above Storm. Nightcrawler then scales up the walls and realizes their only way to beat him is to outthink him. From all that he has read on the Juggernaut, he knows that there's no way they can outfight him. Nor can he stay out of his reach forever. Since Juggernaut can't reach the Goblin, as he keeps calling Nightcrawler, he now shifts his attention to Storm, and he grabs her by the hair and pulls her up by it, saying he will take the girl's life. Kurt teleports himself down again and tells Juggernaut to let her go, or he is going to find out just how much of a demon he really is. Juggernaut says that it will be his pleasure, because the girl isn't worth the effort anyways, and he throws her back on the floor. Aurora damns herself for not being able to help her friends who are begging for her to help them. All she can do is keep on crying her eyes out and say sorry. She knows she has to help them, but she simply can't, and she asks God for forgiveness. She starts to dissociate again, and her mind travels back to what happened in her past, in New York, Harlem to be exact, in the summer of 1951. The time and place where her father, an aspiring photojournalist, and her mother, an African princess, leave New York to go and live in Cairo, Egypt. The 2 of them and their newborn special child. Her memories start to unlock even though she was only 6 months old at that time. The 2 of them can't wait to leave this place, and especially for Aurora's mother it will be like returning home. Even though Cairo is located 2,000 miles north of Kenya, the country in Africa where she came from. Aurora's father looks at Aurora and it seems as if she can understand every word they are saying to one another. And her mother says that she can, because she already knew Aurora was special from the moment of her conception. Fast forward to 1956, in Cairo, where during the crisis over control of the Suez Canal, the armies of Great Britain, France and Israel retaliated for Egypt's taking control over the Suez Canal. French airplanes bombed the city, and David Monroe decided it was best for the family to leave their house and head for the American embassy. One of the French airplanes got caught by anti-aircraft flak burst, after which the pilot decided to eject, to save his own life. But the plane went down with a full load of bombs and fuel and headed straight towards David and his family. He told his wife and child to get down and that he would keep them safe. But that was a promise he was not able to uphold. A massive explosion occurred, after which darkness would surround Aurora. Darkness caused by being buried alive and trapped underneath the rubble, but also darkness for being stuck here, lying next to her dead mother's corpse. And then there was darkness once more. Blessed nothingness, after which she found herself waking up again and with her mother's body being gone. And there she was, all alone and buried underneath rock and rubble, jammed in close around her. Somehow she managed to pull herself free, after which she ended up in the gutters and back alley of Cairo. All by herself, until she was found by the street urchins who were in the service of Ahmed Al-Ghibar, who took her in as well, and taught her cunning tricks with which she learned how to survive, and she soon became the finest beggar and sneak thief in all of Cairo. Later, at the age of 12, Aurora gave in to the yearning inside of her, and she made her way to the south, leaving Cairo and Egypt altogether. She traveled by foot for a year, through the Sahara Desert and into the Serengeti Plains. And even though she had never seen this place before, deep inside she knew that she had found her home. Right there, she grew up into the woman and even into the local weather goddess who Charles Xavier would recruit several years later. Being content in her solitude, all the traumatic memories of her past life gradually faded away over the years, But it is all coming back now, and with a vengeance. And the same man who took her away from Kenya can hear her mental cries for help, oceans away. Professor Xavier, who had already thought he could hear someone calling out for him, is now getting flooded with images through the psychic rapport he shares with all of his students, including Storm. Her cries for help, her pain and her fear, and not in the least, the one image which is dominating every thought, namely the face of Cain Marko. A face Charles Xavier himself is very familiar with. Shocked by this, Charles enters the hospital room where Jean is located in and urgently asks Scott if he can have a word with him in the corridor. Not knowing what's going on, Scott says that he will be with him in a moment, and Jean introduces Xavier to Misty Knight, her roommate in New York. But Xavier says only 2 words to her, and urges Scott to come with him, because every second is vital. Jean apologizes to Misty for Xavier's rude behavior, and says that she's never seen him like this before. Misty says that it's fine and she's more concerned with Jean instead. She can tell that something's been eating her up inside ever since the spaceflight Jean was on, and she asks her what's going on and says that she would like to help. Jean responds by saying that she knows. And while Misty can see Jean's demeanor change right in front of her eyes, Jean asks Misty how she would feel if she had died and brought herself back to life. Outside Jean's room, in the corridor adjacent to it, Xavier tells Scott what's going on in Ireland to the other X-Men. He tells Scott the others have been ambushed by his stepbrother the Juggernaut, and that he has to go and give them assistance immediately. But Scott refuses. He's not leaving Jean's side until she's out of danger. Outraged by this response, Xavier asks Scott if he's truly putting the life of one woman ahead of those of his fellow X-Men. And Scott says that he is, because that woman is the most important thing in his life. Besides, he says, there's nothing he can do to help the X-Men, because there's no way he will be able to get there in time enough to make any difference to the outcome. And on top of that, Xavier himself said that sooner or later the new team is going to have to learn to fight on its own. As callous as it sounds, it looks like that time is right now, Scott says. Xavier then loses it, and he starts berating Scott, calling him ungrateful and an unspeakable cur. And he starts stuttering and finally yells out Scott's name. Shocked, yet worried about his surrogate father and mentor, Scott asks Xavier what's wrong, and it's happening to Xavier once again. Once again, he's experiencing a vision of some kind of alien astronaut. A face he has seen in his dreams, and it's now looking straight at him from inside the mirror he's looking at. And Xavier feels like he's going insane. And over at Cassidy Keep, things are going from bad to worse as well. The battle is still going on, and even though Banshee seems to be getting the upper hand in his fight with his cousin Black Tom, the Juggernaut keeps on trying to smash Nightcrawler to a pulp. Still able to evade the attacks, Nightcrawler clings to a wall and scales it, until he's out of Juggernaut's reach. While Storm is still trying to deal with her trauma-induced claustrophobia, Wolverine attacks Juggernaut once more, but his claws bounce off of Juggernaut's armor, who then simply backhands Wolverine out cold. And while he's holding Wolverine by his costume, wanting to finish him off, Nightcrawler uses a chandelier hanging from the roof of the chamber and swings himself in Juggernaut's direction. In a desperate attempt to rescue his teammate, he grabs one of the torches and smashes it right in Juggernaut's face. And this tactic actually hurts the Juggernaut in a bad way. Black Tom sees this happening and uses his cane to exact revenge on Nightcrawler for hurting his friend. The blast from the cane hits Nightcrawler in the back and he falls to the ground. Hard, and he does not move again. His body turns pretty much invisible in the shadows, and while the battle continues without him taking part in it, he gets dragged out of the room, without anyone noticing it, by pointy-eared figures who have apparently been watching this battle unfold. In the meantime, Banshee kicks Black Tom to the floor, and Tom taunts Banshee, first telling him that he's ashamed of his cousin, the one who put him in jail as an agent of Interpol, for not asking him any questions. Not even the obvious ones, like how him and Juggernaut got out of jail, or how they acquired the money and the knowledge to take this castle for their own and turn it into a death trap. And as Tom pokes Banshee in his gut with his cane, he says it's a pity he will never know who paid them to kill off the X-Men. And even though the team's unexpected arrival sped things up some, the end result is the same. Knowing that they will be making a lot of money in the process, Tom and Juggernaut's vengeance will be that much sweeter. For the Juggernaut though, vengeance will only be truly complete once his hated stepbrother lies dead at his feet. But that will never happen if it's up to Colossus, who has been able to pull himself together in the meantime and is now standing behind the Juggernaut and surprises him with an attack. Filled with rage over what Juggernaut has done to his teammates and friends and over what he has planned to do with Xavier, Colossus punches Juggernaut as hard as he can, with all of his power, saying that to get to Xavier, he will have to defeat Colossus first. And Colossus will not be beaten. He then dares the Juggernaut to get up again, and if he does, he will just knock him down again. So the Juggernaut does just that, and smashes the ground Colossus was standing on, launching him in the air. Colossus then curls himself up into a ball, maneuvering himself towards the Juggernaut, stretches himself out again and push kicks Juggernaut into the wall behind him. And as Colossus keeps on hitting the Juggernaut, the already battered wall collapses right on top of them, and Storm, who is barely coming to from her episode, tries to warn Colossus, but it's too late. Both of them get buried underneath a huge pile of stone, until it explodes outward and reveals that the Juggernaut is triumphant, holding a knocked out cold Colossus in his hands. Seeing Colossus like this makes Storm snap out of it, and she gathers up all the power she can to attack the Juggernaut all by herself. She unleashes a lightning bolt at him, but it doesn't do anything, and he redirects it right back at her. Still too weak to be able to resist, Storm is now knocked out cold as well. And now, with all the X-Men beaten, it is time for the final phase of their plan. To hurt them all in such a bad way that Xavier will feel their pain through the psychic rapport he shares with all of his students. Something the Juggernaut is more than willing to execute, luring his stepbrother into their death trap, as meek and defenseless as a lamb to the slaughter. Thanks for watching this video and I hope you enjoyed it. You can help growing this channel by liking, subscribing and sharing. This tells YouTube that the videos I'm making should be recommended to others and would be very much appreciated. See you next episode.